The new podcast, In the Shadow of Princeton, starts as the matriarch of a prominent Princeton family is found stabbed to death in her locked basement. Investigators look from a serial attacker to her family to Princeton University students. One hot-blooded investigator sees a conspiracy. Is he way off base, or does privilege let you get away with murder? In the Shadow of Princeton is available wherever you get podcasts, or you can binge it ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by National Geographic, presenting its new documentary film, Endurance. Follow the greatest survival story ever told, unpacking the legendary feat of polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, who kept his crew alive for over a year, despite losing their ship in frigid pack ice. Over a century later, a team of modern-day explorers set out to find the sunken ship. Endurance, now streaming on Hulu and Disney+.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Vickie Connor. Together, we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today, we're talking not necessarily about places to go, but rather about how those places got their names.
That's right, Vickie. This is a fun game I like to play with the reference book Oregon Geographic Names, which is chock full of weird and fascinating stories about the origins of our local place names. So I've used this for stories about, for example, how Oregon's mountains or state parks got their current names. And in the process, I've come across like so many interesting and weird factoids.
I feel like I need to purchase this book because I feel like I could just read it from start to finish in one sitting and just learn about all the different places.
I would not recommend reading it start to finish. It's like reading a dictionary. It's like this book I have. So I have the 6th edition in front of me right here by Lewis A. MacArthur. And it is, how many pages is this book? It's like almost 1,000 pages. It is detailed. Like MacArthur was dedicated to figuring out the stories behind the names, and like the fact that like he's updated it so many times. I think now his family is now continuing to update it. Like there's the level of detail on these down to like the name of every county and the name of like specific like rock formations. It's intense, but it's very cool.
I feel like inherently that just means that he had a true love for Oregon.
That's a thing.
So how often do you whip this book out and look something up?
Like, I would say pretty often. Not like, every day, but like, I mean, I do, I think for fun more than anything else. It's like become a fun party game for folks who, what a fun party game for Oregon place name nerds like myself. But sometimes people are like, someone will say like, we're having dinner with people and they're like, oh man, like a friend, this happened the other day. A friend's like, well, how did like Mount Defiance get its name anyway? And I was like, I can tell you that information. Let me just whip out this book. And then when it's there, it's like, who else has something they want to know the name of? Yeah. And we can go from there until people get bored of it. So that's what I wanted to do today. Because this is a place that's not a dinner party. It is reserved for this kind of deep dive into Oregon places. I thought it would be a perfect time to do a little bit of fun for once.
We like to have fun here on this podcast.
So let's get started with just some basic warm-ups just to get a sense of like how this works. So some places that, people know about, you talk about, might not know the origin of the place names.
Yeah. Okay.
So Vickie, let's get started with Mount Hood. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Do you happen to know this one off the top of your head?
Mount Hood. No, I don't know how it got that name.
Do you have like any ideas or guess? Like when you hear Mount Hood, do you like have like a certain like guess of where that name came from?
Really? No, not at all. I mean, unless it has to do with, blanket of snow on top of Mount Hood being its hood.
Yeah. Well, you'd think it might be like a hood, a blanket of snow. But boy, that would be way too clever, wouldn't it? In fact, it was named for Lord Samuel Hood, who was a Navy for the Redcoats,
Oh.
for the British Navy in the
Wait.
18th century.
What?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what did he have to do with Mount Hood?
He was a friend or an associate of Captain Vancouver, who, quote unquote, discovered the mountain, who, was the first sort of like, European to sort of document and see and name the mountain. And so this happened, like Vancouver went up and down this area and saw the mountains and was just like, yes, I will name that one for this person in the British Army. And I'll name that one for another British person. So like Mount St. Helens is named for like the Baron von St. Helens. And like all of these mountains are named after like British generals and stuff. So Mount Hood really, I know people love the name and it's sort of come to sort of become our own, but like looking at the origin of it, I don't know. You could rename that mountain something better, probably.
Right.
Just saying.
Man, it's a little disappointing.
Oh boy. Well, I'm not here to help ruin anyone's associations with these places, but sometimes it is disappointing.
Okay, well, what about is Smith Rock under the same umbrella of like some dude with the last name Smith?
Smith Rock actually has, and this is what we'll see a lot of times too, is that there's like conflicting stories of where names came from.
Mm-hmm.
So some people say that like the name comes from a soldier named something Smith, who in the 1860s fell to his death while his company was camped nearby. However, there's a letter from somebody signed Ochiko in 1867 who has a different story, who says that the area that the Smith Rock was named for John Smith, who was then sheriff of Lynn County.
Mm.
So again, this is a pretty popular thing of once white settlers came, they just named places after either themselves, people they knew, or places that they came from.
I see.
So this is a small tangent, but like Detroit Lake was named after like Detroit, the place, the city Detroit, Michigan, where a lot of people who had camped there before it was a lake just were from Detroit. So like we saw a lot of stuff like that.
Do we know, was Smith Rock, did it ever have a different name before that?
Like you're talking about like indigenous place names?
Right, yeah.
It is a really interesting and sometimes tricky thing to say. I mean, so part of it is that, so if you talk to tribes or indigenous communities who lived around these areas, there may be some like traditional place names for some places. There also are maybe some like more modern place names for places. Mm-hmm. But there's an issue here of like, if we talk about like Mount Hood, for example, like I know like East has sort of become a popular indigenous name for the mountain that is accepted by a lot of indigenous communities and by tribes and non-indigenous folks alike. But the fact is that so many languages were spoken in like, eyeshot of Mount Hood, mm-hmm. that it's impossible that there is one name that everybody used, if there was a name at all. The word that was used to describe the Columbia River, for example, for the Chinookan peoples who lived along the Columbia River, a lot of times is translated to be like Waimal, or some version of that, which just means big river, mm-hmm. right? So I think there's a cultural difference, is my understanding, in a lot of sort of the original indigenous inhabitants here and the white settlers in like naming places. Like when white folks came in and just started like naming spots after themselves, that was a different practice than was here for the millennia prior.
I see. Well, so going off of Columbia River, where did that one come from?
Columbia River, named, of course, for the ship that first sailed in to the Columbia River, the Columbia Rediviva, on May 11th, 1792, under Captain Robert Gray. This was an American ship. So like people had tried to find the entrance to the Columbia River for so long. Obviously, there were people living at the entrance to the Columbia River for so long, but the Europeans and the Americans eventually were trying to sail a ship into the mouth of the Columbia so that they could open up this area for trade and settlement. Obviously so much good timber and so much fish and all this stuff, and they wanted to sort of sell. But so many ships had like tried and failed to enter into what is now known as the graveyard of the Pacific.
Yeah.
Hard to sail a ship into there, but the Columbia Rediviva was the first one to do it, and as such they got to name the river after that boat. So it is named the Columbia River. And you could really go into like where the word Columbia comes from if you want to dive deeper and deeper and deeper back into this, but I think that's probably a little too much for this particular venue. That's like a few of like the basics here, but there are like obviously some like really interesting or weird or funny stories I found in here as well.
What has some really interesting or weird, funny stories?
Okay, so this is a friend of mine at dinner when we were playing this game. She was like, "What about Mountain Defiance? Mm-hmm. Like, what's that about? What's being defied in this place name?" Right? This is a great one. It's a short entry in this book. It was named by Dr. P.G. Barrett, who was an early settler in the Hood River Valley, because the mountain was the last to hold its snow in the spring, thus defying the elements.
I like that one.
Isn't that fun?
That's so fun.
Yeah. So like that's what I'm talking about. That is a creative place name. It's not like he could have just been like, I'm going to call it, Mountain Barrett after myself, but he didn't. He found a fun way to sort of, be like, oh yeah, it's defying the element. Like that's great. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So good.
What else?
Sticking in the gorge, because there's so many weird place names in the gorge. One of my favorites, and this is what I love. This is one that kind of often gets into this game, because whenever we're talking about the gorge and places, people love to bring up Viento State Park, which is right there, which you would assume, anyone who is like, even a little bit knows Spanish is like, oh, it's for wind, because that is a very windy area, yeah. Right? It's a very easy assumption, but boy, is that not the answer. The name Viento is a combination of three names of railroad. I guess tycoon is maybe not right, but like railroad businessmen. Villard, Endicott, and Tolman. So VI for Villard, mm-hmm. EN for Endicott, and TO for Tolman. So they were all like really invested in like the railroad industry as it came through the gorge. And so they named that area after a combination of the first two letters of their last names, Viento.
All right. Well, that's a creative one.
But the fact that it just happens to also like, I wonder, did they know that it was the Spanish word for wind? And we're like, oh, that's a nice coincidence.
Yeah.
I don't know. The book here says that the word Viento had nothing to do with the name, but like, really? That's a crazy coincidence.
I know. So who ultimately like has the power of naming some of this stuff?
Well, I mean, a lot of these were just like, accepted place names originally. Eventually, I mean, ultimately it's the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, which like was a federal body to sort of like be like, we all need to get on the same page about what everything is called.
Yeah.
And this is like, so it is like pure bureaucracy at this point. So getting a place name changed, for example, mm-hmm. Can sometimes be really difficult, even if it's, named for dumb reasons. It's really hard to get it changed. So, unless there's a little bit of like political power at play. So we're kind of just stuck with whatever they, decided was like the, most commonly accepted name for something at a time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense.
Which takes us to a place that as far as like dumb place names, Hart Mountain is a good one. Hart is the spelling of this mountain. I mean, this is down in Lake County. It's pretty remote, very beautiful place. It was originally settled by a couple of ranchers who used a heart-shaped cattle brand. They didn't know how to spell the word heart, and so they spelled it Hart instead of Heart.
I love a misspelling that ends up being the perfect name.
That's how it's spelled now. Because those two dudes couldn't spell. That's it.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible, actually.
Oh my God. And to what we were just talking about, this entry ends with, it is not likely that the spelling will ever be changed as the incorrect form is universally used. So that's just how it works.
Someone makes a typo, and that's how it works.
I'm obsessed with this stuff. I think it is so weird and so interesting.
It is pretty funny.
Vickie, I have this big book in front of me.
Yeah.
Let's play this game.
Okay.
What are some places that you would like to know the name origin for? And we'll flip to them and we'll just read them here in real time.
I gotta know. Wait, oh man, this might be in Washington, so it might not be in the book. Yeah, dang it. Dog Mountain, I'm so interested in.
Oh boy. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a different one.
Okay.
That is basically that's close to that. Because
Okay.
Dog Mountain, I'm guessing, might be very similar to all the other dog place names in that
Mhm.
area. Dog River was the original name of Hood River.
Oh.
Hood River, originally called Dog River. This is because back in the sort of old pioneer days, like Lewis and Clark coming through, fur trappers coming through down the Columbia River, they didn't. It's such a weird thing because it's such a land of bounty, right? With so much to eat, so much to forage. Lewis and Clark famously did not know how to like eat and roast camas bulbs and got sick on them. And didn't know a lot about I guess, imagine you're coming through this land with these animals you're not familiar with.
Oh no.
These plants you're not familiar with. So instead of doing that, they traded for a lot of dogs to consume.
This is not the ending that I thought it would be.
So there was a lot of dog place names in that area because hey, that's where a lot of dogs were eaten. So at some point though, this enterprising local, this Mrs. Nathaniel Coe. Come on, what is her real name? Give me a break. She was like, absolutely not. For not calling it Dog River. We need a different name. And good for her, honestly, because that's wild. And so they eventually did change it to Hood River on account of Mount Hood, which again was named after that random naval officer from the British military.
Okay. Well,
aren't you glad you asked?
I will just say that next time I hike Dog Mountain, it will be like as a defiant act against what they did or what it's named after, Yeah.
In memory of all those dogs.
Yes, in memory of all those dogs. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, my next one, who knows what could be behind this, but hopefully something better than that. What about Angel's Rest?
Ooh, that's a great one. I love that we're sticking with the gorge too. So many good ones in the gorge. Oh, it's not in here?
What?
Wait, EF. Wait, no, do I just not have the alphabet? It's not in here.
Okay.
Go from Aneroid Lake to Angel Peak. No, not in here. What else you got?
I'm interested to know about Rooster Rock. Is that one in there?
Wow, I'm so glad you asked. Do you have any guesses about where Rooster Rock got its name?
Well, I was like, okay, does it look like somehow like a rooster?
to the name, this is one of my favorite entries in this book, actually.
Okay.
So there's a lot. It talks a lot about how it was at one point referred to as the obelisk. So we're talking about the actual rock itself, the sort of like large, obelisk shaped rock. But the in the book here says simply, the modern name is of phallic significance.
I had some type of feeling that was it.
Yeah. People saw that rock and they gave it a different name, a rhyming name. That at some point people were like, we can't call it that. we can't say that. So I'm not sure if we can say that on this podcast. But they changed it to a Rooster Rock instead. And that is as it stands today.
Oh goodness!
You're picking great ones, Vickie. What else?
Inadvertently too. I did not know this. Okay.
Maybe, yeah. Well, let's get out of the gorge. Let's go somewhere else.
Bad vibes for the names of the gorge. Maybe like Florence, Oregon.
Oh, Florence, Oregon. Yeah. Who's that Florence? It sounds like a name, right?
Right.
Okay, so the town is said to have been named for A.B. Florence, who was a member of the state senate at the sessions of 1858, 59, and 60, representing Lane County. But according to another story, the town was named for a French vessel wrecked about 1873 at the mouth of the Siuslaw River.
Huh.
The wreck of the Florence.
The wreck of the Florence.
There you have it.
Okay.
So was it a shipwreck or was it this A.B. Florence?
Right.
I guess we'll never know.
Okay. I'm just like looking at this map, some other town names on the coast. What about Gold Beach?
Oh, Gold Beach. Yeah, what do you think when you hear Gold Beach? What are you thinking?
Truly, I hope that they found some gold there, but also could be someone's last name.
Gold was discovered in the sands of Curry County in the early 1850s, and the beaches were named on that account. This was like a part of the gold rush in Oregon of that time. We talk about like the gold rush in California a lot. That's the story people know, but there was a huge gold rush in Oregon, and including at Gold Beach. So I don't know how much gold was found in the sands there. I wouldn't go looking now and expecting to find much. But it's kind of funny because I feel like when I hear Gold Beach, like I think about like golden sands, and a lot of the beaches around there are like dark sand beaches. And it's always a funny thing to me, driving up there and being like, it's actually really more like, black sand beach.
Okay, a few more, because I am finding this very fun. But
right? That's what I'm saying.
So, I mean, obviously Three Sisters Wilderness, they're naming like each mountain as a sister, but is there anything more to that?
Oh, there definitely is more to the Three Sisters.
Yeah.
Boy, there's in fact a pretty lengthy entry in here. Mm-hmm. So let me just kind of browsing through this. Okay, so in 1856, the mountains appeared on a map as the Three Sisters. There is a story to the effect that at one time the three mountains were known as Mount Faith, Mount Hope, and Mount Charity, beginning at the north. So in 1927, a local person confirmed this and said that the name Three Sisters was originally applied by the members of a Methodist mission at Salem in the early 1840s. That the individual peaks were given those names, Mount Faith, Mount Hope, and Mount Charity. But then eventually, it sounds like those names sort of became known as the Three Sisters. They kind of got lumped together. And now today, of course, they're not named Faith, Hope, and Charity. They're named North Sister, Middle Sister, South Sister. Right? That's what they're called. Well, it's like that they had, and who knows how accurate this information. This is all like second, third, fourth hand information from like 200 years ago. But who knows how much people actually said that. But like at some point they started calling them the Three Sisters, which they're together. You can see them all sort of like 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That name stuck, and here we have it. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't love Faith, Hope, and Charity. It's a little saccharine for my taste, but if folks, if you're into that, you can go ahead and feel free to call them whatever you want.
There we go. Okay, one more just to finish us off here. I'm just like picking these places on the map. What about Prairie City?
Prairie City. Boy, where is Prairie City?
It's just east of John Day.
Prairie City. So the book says that the first community name there was Dixie in 1862. But that by 1870, much of the area had been destroyed by placer operations, and a new town site had been selected at the mouth of the creek near the John Day River. The name Prairie City is reported to have been chosen by J.W. King. Who is that? The book does not say who J.W. King is. But so somebody, in some position of power in this little town said, like, I'm going to call it Prairie City.
Okay.
And that's that.
I did, there is a theme here of men being like, well, this is what I'm going to name it. And that's what stuck.
Yeah. It's, and I find these really, really interesting. The way that like you can dig back into place names and find like these wild stories or like these different histories. And there's like it's like a Russian doll. You can find stories within stories within stories.
Yeah.
So my wife, Sadie, she's from a place called Tacoma Park, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's a little town right in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. And when I went there, I was like, Tacoma, that's like, like Tacoma, Washington, right? But they spell it different. They spell it Takoma, Tacoma Park. And I was like, immediately thought, well, I've got to know how this place got its name.
Yeah.
And the person who like designed the city, again, this man who designed the city, was looking for a name for it. And a friend had suggested the name, the indigenous name for Mount Rainier, right? Tacoma, various things, and suggested the name meant high up near the heaven. And he liked it. He's like, oh, I love that. That's so good. Tacoma. And he changed the spelling and added park. And so his like, little town he was building was like up near the heavens. It was sort of like elevated and better somehow. I don't know. So he named it Tacoma Park, and now that's what that place is called. It has no relation to Mount Rainier or Northwest indigenous culture at all. Absolutely none. But that name got translated all the way across the other side of the continent to this little town. It's fascinating. I mean, that's just there's so many stories like this out there.
Yeah. Fun fact, my very first journalism internship was at the Tacoma Voice. Right.
Oh my gosh, really?
DC. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you know all about Tacoma Park.
It's a great little place. I love it. The farmers market is super cute. Great restaurants. I really like Tacoma Park.
It's right on the metro, so you can like get there really easily if you're in DC. Anyway, this is we're turning into a travel podcast about DC, which I feel like you and I could honestly do a DC episode at this point.
Absolutely.
But like, yeah, just the way that things get transplanted all over the place. I don't know. I think it's just fascinating. But here's what I want to know, Vickie. Should we petition to change the name of Mount Hood?
Yes.
Or is it too late at this point?
Well, I also feel like so many people will refer to it as Y East. I mean, obviously Mount Hood is more common that you'll hear people say, but just change it to Y East. That's what it. Yeah, I really thought it was going to be something more on the nose about, the hood of the mountain, but
not even.
No.
Not even.
Boo.
No, just
we need a pre-recorded boo button here.
Some guy named it after some guy, and now that's what we all have to call it. We don't have to. That's the thing. I mean, when it comes to place names, you can call stuff what you want, I think is the truth. And if you want to call it Y East instead, you can feel free to do that. It might be confusing for some people, but I think that is, something that you can feel free to do. Well, this was fun.
Yeah, thanks for flipping through all these, although I will need some time to recover from Dog Mountain.
I'm so sorry. I should have just told you to move on. We'll do something different. You don't want to hear the story. But then you would have wanted to hear it even more. I know how it works.
Traumatized.
Oh my gosh. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show, and if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at oregonlive.com/podsupport. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show is produced by me, Vickie Connor, alongside Jamie Hale.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds of Zen.